Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for these Soundbites. Today, we've got Fiona with us from the Natalie Kate Moss Trust. She's here to talk to us about haemorrhagic stroke. This is part one of a two-part series talking about stroke, and next month we've got Liz Iverson to talk to us about stroke and neuro-rehabilitation issues. But without further ado, let me introduce you to Fiona. And I'm going to start by asking Fiona to tell us a bit about the Natalie Kate Moss Trust and the personal history behind it. Over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Nadia, and thank you for having me. So the Natalie Kate Moss Trust was set up back in 2012. So we set up the trust in memory of my sister Natalie, who unfortunately had a brain hemorrhage when she was 26. So she was fine. She was healthy, young, just moved to London, and completely out of nowhere had a excruciating headache, which is obviously one of the main symptoms of a brain hemorrhage, and was rushed to hospital, and after 5 days intensive care, unfortunately passed away. So we set up the charity hoping to do something to bring some light out of the darkness, and hoping to find some sort of some sort of resolution in a way to help people in the future and help families and who might be going through this really devastating time. But what we learned through this process that, Natalie's case wasn't a single case that no one ever hears about. Brain hemorrhages are incredibly common. And actually there are 4.6 million cases of hemorrhagic stroke every single year globally. Now, that's actually more cases than lung cancer and breast cancer. And you think about how many times you hear about these cases, but yet we never really hear about hemorrhagic stroke. So a big part of our work is to kind of, raise the voice of brain hemorrhages, to create more awareness so that we can create change, because we believe that through that voice, we can really create change. But it is so devastating because it's 4.6 million cases every year, but only 3 out of 5 people will survive 1 month after brain hemorrhage, whether they get to 6 months then or a year, and even if they do survive, they will likely have incredibly severe disability. So it's a devastating condition, and a lot needs to change. And these numbers, these stats that I'm giving to you haven't changed in 40 years. We look at other things, other conditions, whether it is a different types of cancers, whether it is diabetes or whatnot, we're hearing that those areas are progressing, but we're not hearing this with brain hemorrhage. So a big part of our work is that we are in partnership with Manchester University. So in 2012, when we started Natalie Kate Moss Trust, or NKMT, as I refer to it as, we approached the university because Natalie was an alumna of the university and said, is there anything that we can do? Do you have any research that we can support? And at that point, they were mainly focusing on stroke caused by blood clot rather than a bleed on the brain. So, but that conversation started the ball rolling, basically, and became a catalyst for the change that we've seen over the last 12 years now, whereby the team has grown, exponentially. They have plus 20 researchers in there. They've developed treatments which have been rolled out into the NHS, and one treatment in particular has proven to reduce mortality at 1 month by 10%. So really exciting things coming out of the research. And I think it's great to see research growing and new research projects coming up and whatnot. But it's like the best part of it is actually seeing it translate into life-saving research, and that proving that it saves people's lives, because at the end of the day, our mission is to reduce the number of devastating, situations happening as a result of a brain hemorrhage as well. So for the last 12 years, that's largely been our focus in terms of supporting the research and the treatment and improving outcomes after somebody has a brain hemorrhage. But over the last 18 months in particular, we've really been focusing on our prevention campaign as well. And we know that hypertension, high blood pressure is the leading cause of lifestyle-related brain hemorrhages. So we've been doing an awful lot of work campaigning and driving awareness around the importance of checking our blood pressure. And the great thing is about this campaign is that it's not new. We're not telling somebody to do something new that they've never heard of. They've never heard of blood pressure or whatnot. But what we have seen is that, if I give you the stats, on average, a third of a population has high blood pressure, and 50% of those people are undiagnosed. So they're therefore at risk of not just a brain hemorrhage, but countless other problems, whether it's heart attack, different types of stroke, And now what I'm learning as well is they're also more likely to develop, you know, Alzheimer's and dementia. And actually, if they can manage their blood pressure more, that diminishes some of those conditions as well. So, you know, there's a big piece of work here. It's still very much at the embryonic stages, but what we're doing is we're looking at it from multiple different angles and understanding, one, spreading the message and educating and providing opportunities for people to check their blood pressure. So we go into companies and deliver what we call a lunch and learn, where essentially we're talking through a seminar and helping people better understand why should they check their blood pressure. What are some of these stats around blood pressure? You know, how do they do it? How do they make it easier for themselves to be checking their blood pressure? Where, like last week, for example, we were in Manchester, in the centre of Manchester, checking people's blood pressure all day and looking at these different touch points and like talking to more people. And that is great, but it's not obviously going to create the systemic changes that we want to create. So we're looking bigger, we're looking broader, we're looking at legislative changes, we're looking at how can we improve access point to monitors, because obviously a lot of people think, you know, the only place I can get my blood pressure checked is at the doctor's, which is obviously not true. But it's creating that or driving that education and that awareness around how do we check our blood pressure more? When should we check it? Why should we check it? So there's a lot of work to be done. And obviously this is not a new campaign. You know, you'll see the NHS, you'll see a lot of different charities talking about blood pressure. And it is the same message. And the great thing is that, you know, the more people that are talking about it, hopefully the message lands. But we are also coming at it from a slightly different angle in that what we are trying to do is that we know that the age group between 16 to 35 has the highest number of cases or percentage of cases of undiagnosed cases proportionally to the number of cases versus other age groups, because they're not going to the GP as much, because therefore they're not getting their blood pressure checked when they go to the GP. So what we hope to do by changing or educating that age group, changing their behaviors, changing their habits around blood pressure, what we'd like to see is that they take those habits as they age. So then they're more likely to develop hypertension. They're already checking their blood pressure. They can deal with it quicker. And hopefully as they bring up their children and they've got young children, you start to think that they're creating systemic change as well. So yeah, we're really focusing on this campaign as well to kind of, you know, it's half the job. If we can prevent them before they happen, we all know that prevention is better than cure.
And how often would you say people should be checking their blood pressure? Because I know I don't very often at all.
Yeah, what we're trying to target is every month, because we feel that it's an easy thing for people to remember. In the same, it kind of falls in line with, you know, if people women to check their boobs, for example, they're encouraged to check it every month. So it keeps everything very consistent as well. If you do have, like, you know, normal blood pressure, the likelihood is if you checked it 2 months later, it should be fine. But it's getting into that habit. It takes 40 seconds to check your blood pressure. You know, it's no time at all. So yeah, as I say, these are the two main things that we're working on now. It's developed an awful lot, the charity, over the last 12 years and 13 years since Natalie died as well. But it still feels like we're very much at the beginning of things because of all the changes we've made over the last 18 months, particularly. And it feels like there's a lot that we can go after, because there's not really another brain hemorrhage charity in the UK that we're aware of. There's a lot of brain injury charities and brain rehabilitation charities and things like that. But actually a charity that's focusing on how do we actually change the reality? How do we shift these statistics rather than just accepting the reality and then dealing with what happens?
And
So
you're really seeing that kind of need as well, you know, because as you say, there are those charities out there, you know, that are primarily for, you know, ischemic strokes, but you're seeing that real need from people who have suffered hemorrhagic strokes, you know, to find, you know, support and that's specific to them.
Yeah, exactly. And we get a lot of people who, whether they come to us just to send us an email or want to sign up to a challenge, and the feedback that we quite often get is that, you know, they've seen different charities around brain or head injury, but it's not been exactly what's happened to them. And then when they come across our story, because brain, and I've had a conversation about this morning as well, you know, brain hemorrhage, it's so devastating. It's literally a line in the sand. It's a schism in time where there's a before and an after. And if you've experienced that, you really get it. It's not a bang on the head, or, you know, it's different. And it is so incredibly devastating because There is no diagnosis period. There's no opportunity to kind of say, okay, well, we'll sort things out now. And so it is so specific. Obviously, then, there's lots of different subtypes of hemorrhagic stroke and different types of bleeds and things like that. Obviously, the severity of the bleed can be very, very different. But in essence, the reality of a brain hemorrhage is quite consistent. And so, yeah, we do get an awful lot of people who come to us who when they read for example, we've got a page of real life stories on our website, which I think is really, really important because it's that sense of shared experience. And I have a lot of people who will read a story and go, it's amazing. It feels like I'm reading my own story. And I think that's really important for people to share in that experience so that they find the strength to even support us and help us with our mission, but to support themselves too.
Yeah. So what are the ways, that people could get involved if they do want to support the trust, the charity?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole plethora of ways, really, but an obvious one, is we have a number of different challenges. If anyone wants to take on the Manchester Half, I know we've got a few places left for that in October, but countless other ones, whether they're like London Marathon or Manchester Marathon or Amsterdam Marathon or whatever, we've got them all, or team ones, 3 Peaks, etc. We've got lots of different volunteering opportunities, and so if someone signs up for a volunteering opportunity, we just post, what do we have available? And if you're available, great. If you're not, you're not. So it's very easy to kind of get involved in that way. There's no commitment. So there's lots of different ways. We're always running different events. We've got a golf day coming up in October. We just had our major fundraiser as well. So there's always something kind of going on as well. Probably the best thing to do is signing up to our newsletter, and then you can be kept up to date, or keeping an eye on our LinkedIn or our Instagram or other socials as well.
Yeah, we'll provide all of those details at the end of this webinar. And so what's next?
So obviously we've spoken about let's call them our 2 main pillars, which is our focus on supporting the research at Manchester University into better treatment to improve the outcomes after brain hemorrhage. So that's very much after brain hemorrhage. Then there's our work around the prevention, so before. But we also want to kind of support the community as well. I've already alluded to it. There is a community out there, and they do need that extra support. It is so incredibly specific. And that could be support in terms of emotional support, or just reading other people's stories, or connecting to other people. But actually what we're doing now is actually working with a number of partners who already have the support that they have available. And, whether that is neurophysio, whether that is therapy, and starting to build out resources around that, access to their services as well, and really starting to look at how can we support that community too. Because as I said before, of course, there are plenty of other things out there, but they're all a bit all over the place. They're all a bit sporadic. They might have to go to one company for one thing and one company for something else. And what we want to do is start to building out sort of a center, the place to go for brain hemorrhages in the UK, so that they get all their information, but all their support as well. And that's our aim ultimately, is to build this community, because as I said before, if we can build this community, we can build a voice. And I think it's with that voice that we can start to change some of these statistics, because, without that, they haven't changed, and they won't change. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but fingers crossed we're on the right path, and we're starting to make some real change too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's amazing, what you've done, so far, as you say, in this space where not a lot has been done before. So hugely commendable to you. We don't have any questions in our chat, but as I said, I will put Fiona's details at the end of this webinar. Also, the webinar will be available to watch on our website, so feel free to have a look, have another look, or share it. And it just leaves me to say thank you. It's great to hear about all of the work that you've done, and all of the work, no doubt, that you will do as well. And yeah, if anyone can, lend a hand and support in any of the ways that Fiona said, then I'm sure they'd be super grateful. But thank you so much, and don't forget to tune in next month when we'll be hearing more about stroke from a neuro rehabilitation perspective.
Great, thank you.
Thanks so much.